Hey Teresa, how you doing? Okay, so we're looking fantastic here. I think the illustrations themselves are looking beautiful, and I've got specific comments for each of the illustrations. But I'm gonna go ahead and take a look at the series itself. So there's a couple of issues in the series itself, and right now I'm not exactly sure how this happened. But that clipping mask that should be kept intact in all of these stamps. And the reason I say that is because you can see this one, let's say, okay, the bottom of this image comes down, this illustration comes down to the first perforation about halfway through, right? Well, this one is clear up at the start of the second perforation. Do you see what I'm saying? And then the end of it comes to the beginning of the first, whereas the end of this is at the end of the first perforation. So you really, that has got to be a consistent area, definitely. And that's going to add a tremendous amount of harmony to the series itself. So watch that clipping mask and make sure that that area doesn't change, the live kind of playing area, as it were. Okay, typography I think is really super casual. I think it's too casual. I think there's a casual air about the um, illustration itself, but I think that this is almost on par in my estimation with Comic Sans, and I don't mean to sound discouraging. I just think that I definitely think a minimal typeface is the choice here. I wouldn't go serif. I would go sans serif, but not this kind of like kind of comic marker type hand rendered kind of feel to it. Hope that makes sense. I understand the circle with the stars, American iconic, but I think it's taken too much hierarchy. I mean, it's grabbing too much attention. First, it's the biggest and brightest thing on the page. Second, it's red, and third, it's in the center of the composition. So it immediately, your viewer is going to find themselves looking at this first, and that's just because of the fact that it's a hierarchy hog. I like the idea of creating a background. I don't think I would go this prevalent in terms of visual weight and the attention that it's demanding. So I would ease up on the background a little bit. You want the focus to be where the focus belongs, and that is on the illustrations. So definitely think about that. Okay, so we talk about typography, talk about the background. So let's talk about the illustrations themselves. I think they're fantastic. I mean, they're coming along beautifully. A couple of things I'm noticing here, for instance, in Robin Williams, the one thing that is really, really missing to the point where it's almost causing some uncomfortable visual tension is the lack of detail in the hair. And the reason I say this is because you got these wonderful eyebrows, you got these beautiful eyes, and the depiction of nice depth and dimension right through, full of life right there. But then we just completely flatten out here. And that is also a little bit jarring in the series itself because these are so that you've got a lot of texture in here and some good highlights in both these, especially in Farley. So let's go ahead and carry that through on Richard Pryor and Robin Williams. Some hair highlights I think will really make a big difference here. I think the cracks in the forehead are too prominent. I mean, they're not that prominent here, but they're there. But definitely, they're really, really a pretty integral part of this forehead. So I would reduce those a little bit. A couple of facial shadows. I think there's some cool techniques here. Like there's one right there. A little neck shadow is going to go a long way. What do we have neck shadow here? But no, you can see the depiction of tonal variation there. But the next shadow I wanted to show you was here it is. It's the Maryland. Just a little shadow goes a long way. And this is a very flat illustration, right? But look at the dimension and the depth gathered through that simple shadow right there. I think we can follow suit here in a couple of areas here. Richard Pryor's looking fantastic. Again, a little bit of texture in the hair. I think that's really, really going to go a long way. Love the way that you've depicted the tie. It's kind of askew a little bit. That's fantastic. This is really a wonderful, wonderful illustration. Not many comments here. You're good to go here. This was great. Background, same thing. All other. This one, I think, right now, I think there's just too much. This is too much of a difference right here. the darkness, and the darkness goes all the way down his neck. So he's got kind of like this Flintstones kind of, and again, I don't mean to sound discouraging, this kind of Flintstones kind of beard that just doesn't feel right. That the beard is to depict, I mean, the darkness is to depict the fact that he hasn't shaved, right? But I mean, that should really start dissipating down here in the neck, I think. So that's going to have, you're going to have to make some artistic, take some liberties there and try to figure out a way that we can depict that as being dark because of the fact, I mean, you could even create a brush and try to make the individual whiskers. That would be really cool. But at the very least, I just think that this two-tone thing is just a little jarring. Another artistic liberty I think we should really think about is this eye right here, because right now I totally get what you're doing here, and it works in the photograph, but over here it just looks a little bit odd, like that eye's pointing in the right direction. So you might want to adjust that a little bit. And like I said, take some liberties here, right? Take some artistic liberties. And a lot of times you have to do that in illustration. You have to actually take some liberties and say, okay, I traced this verbatim from a template layer, but this looks strange. And quite often I find myself going back in and saying, okay, what makes sense here? Not what exactly am I seeing, because we all know that a photograph does not translate perfectly to an illustration. Never will. There's too many optical illusions like this, where this eye looks perfectly fine here, but here it looks like it's going the wrong direction. So go ahead and address that. This is just fantastic. I would love to see those bracelets on there. I think that would tie it home. I really do. I really do. I think the bracelets would be fantastic. That's really good work. That neck shadow right there. That's what I'm talking about right there. That dimension right there is gorgeous. Can we get it here a little bit to a little bit higher of a degree? And definitely through here. Okay, so that is really, boy, that's good. That's all I really have. I mean, you know, a lot of other students, I'm talking about this idea of presenting each piece cropped so that they take the same amount of area in the space. But I think that you are understanding this, the glue that holds a series together. And quite often that has to do with scale and size. But in your particular case, you've created this background. Now, I did recommend changing that background, but I think that background is enough to indicate series that this doesn't bother me at all. The fact that this is completely a different size and taken from a completely different focal plane than the other illustrations. So again, just watch that clipping rack. Make sure each of these take the exact same spot in the composition. One final thing I want to mention is just keep this in mind, okay? And you can go back through the typography section of the class, and look through some of those resources as well. But one thing I want to mention about typography is it's rarely ever interesting when centered. And I say that because we've got centered type. So go ahead and take that. And wow, this is fantastic. I'm just really enjoying this project. So I can't wait to see this one completed, and we're getting there. So in a couple of days we'll see this completed, and if between now and then you have any questions at all, or if you would like me to clarify anything or look at additional work, please have at it. I'll be more than glad to do so. All right, great job. Thank you.